My daughter is in the emergency room, I texted. We are busy with your sister, my mom said. Then she insulted my daughter, so I canceled their mortgage payments, their car loan, and every one of their credit cards. I stood in the corridor of the house where I grew up, my eyes scanning the framed pictures covering the wall, my sister's graduation, her wedding day, the birth of her first child. In every photograph, my parents beamed with pride. Any trace of my own accomplishments was noticeably absent. A familiar tightness formed in my stomach. After 35 years, you'd think I wouldn't feel it anymore. From the kitchen, my mother's voice drifted toward me. Kevin, is that you? Come give me a hand with these dishes. I paused. I hadn't come here to do dishes. I had come to establish boundaries. Stepping into the kitchen, I found my mother hurriedly arranging a platter of appetizers, Margaret's celebration. Of course, my sister had just been promoted to department manager at a local bank. A position she secured through my father's connections. Can you finish these while I go get ready? She didn't wait for my reply, already wiping her hands on a towel. Your father picked up the wrong crackers. Margaret prefers sesame, not plain. I simply nodded and took her spot at the counter. Same story, different occasion. My phone buzzed. A message from Stacy, my former sister-in-law. Did you tell them? Yet, I hadn't. How do you break the news to your parents that you're cutting them off financially after years of supporting them? How do you explain that their only granddaughter recently completed a family tree assignment and didn't include them? The front door slammed shut. Heavy footsteps approached. Kevin. My father acknowledged, barely glancing my way. Where's your mother? Margaret will be here in an hour. My chest tightened. She's getting ready. He nodded once before disappearing into the living room without another word. I quietly arranged the crackers, recalling the countless times I had stood in this very kitchen, yearning for approval that never came. My full scholarship to UCLA, my promotion to senior analyst, the birth of my daughter, Mia. Nothing had ever been enough to shift their attention from Margaret. She had always been their miracle child, the one they had after years of devastating miscarriages, the daughter they had long given up hope on. I was just the trial run, the practice attempt. I had spent my entire life trying to earn what she had effortlessly received. Their admiration, their attention, their pride. When Jessica walked out on me for a coworker 3 years ago, I assumed my parents would finally step up. Their son, suddenly a single father, surely needed support. Instead, they questioned if I had been the reason for the marriage's failure. Had I focused too much on my career? Had I neglected my responsibilities as a husband? It wasn't them who offered a helping hand. It was Jessica's parents. Stacy and Brian, no longer my in-laws, but still my real family, stepped in. They picked Mia up from school, kept her on weekends when my job required me to travel, showered her with love and attention. Meanwhile, my own parents had been too preoccupied until 6 months ago. The sudden shift caught me off guard. Suddenly, they called every week to ask about Mia, invited us over for Sunday dinners, offered to babysit. I wanted to believe it meant something. Maybe they had finally realized what they had missed all these years. Maybe they had finally decided to be present as grandparents. Then Margaret's promotion happened and suddenly everything became clear. They hadn't changed. They just needed money. My mother returned to the kitchen now wearing a new blouse, one that I had paid for. Did you finish the appetizers? Margaret will be here any minute. I inclined my head and slid the tray in her direction. We need to discuss something. Her face shifted instantly, enthusiasm fading into apprehension. About what? Can this wait until after the event? It could, but it wouldn't. I'm stopping all financial contributions, I stated, my voice steadier than I expected. Her face lost all color. What financial contributions? As if she had no idea. As if I hadn't been covering their vehicle loan for half a decade, as if I hadn't taken care of the cost of the roof replacement last summer, the property levies, the vacation to Hawaii, every single one of them. My hands trembled slightly, but I pressed them firmly against the counter. The car loan, the credit accounts, the home insurance, everything. She gawked at me, her mouth opening and closing, searching for words. Why would you do this? After all we've done for you. A sharp, humorless chuckle escaped before I could hold it back. Oh? And what exactly have you done for me? We raised you. We made sure you had food to eat. The bare minimum. She was attempting to take credit for fulfilling basic parental duties. When Jessica left, who actually supported me? When Mia was sick and needed to get to her follow-up appointments, who stepped in? When I was promoted, who even acknowledged it? Not them. Never them. My father stepped into the doorway, his brow furrowing. What's going on here? My mother turned toward him, her voice rising in indignation. Kevin says he's cutting us off financially after everything we've done for him. His face darkened. Is this about that situation? We already explained. It's about everything. The words poured out, years of disappointment, neglect, and realization bursting free. It's about Mia calling Stacy grandma because she actually treats her like one. It's about you two skipping her birthday to go on Margaret's vacation home trip. It's about me needing emergency surgery, and you refusing to pick up your own granddaughter because Margaret had a dinner. 3 weeks ago, appendicitis. I had been rushed to the emergency room, barely conscious from the pain. My only coherent thought was Mia, alone at after-school care, waiting for someone to pick her up. My parents had been my first call. Of course, they had. We're at Margaret's promotion dinner, my mother had said, annoyance dripping from her tone. Can't her mother get her? Jessica was in Seattle with her new husband. I had barely managed to explain through the haze of pain. Well, we can't leave now. Margaret would be devastated. Then the final blow. She's just so much work sometimes. A burden. My child, their granddaughter, an inconvenience. Stacy, however, had answered immediately. She had dropped everything. She not only picked up Mia, but stayed by my side in the hospital overnight, rearranging waiting room chairs to form a makeshift bed where she could sleep. That was the moment I understood the distinction between obligation and love, between blood and true family. My father's voice yanked me back to the present. You're overreacting. We couldn't leave Margaret's dinner. You know how much it meant to her. More important than their granddaughter, left alone and frightened. More important than their son, rushed into surgery. I'm done, I said. My voice quiet, but unwavering. No more financial support. No more pretending. You don't get to use me when it benefits you and discard me when it doesn't. My mother's face crumpled not with remorse, but with calculation. The car payment is due in a few days and your father's medication, Margaret's new salary could cover it, or they could finally dip into the retirement savings they had been hoarding while I had been financing their lifestyle, not my responsibility anymore. The front door swung open and Margaret's cheerful voice rang out, Mom, Dad, I brought champagne. That was my cue to leave. I grabbed my purse off the counter. Kevin, wait. My mother's voice rose in desperation. You can't do this to us. But I could, and I was. I walked past Margaret in the hallway, catching the flicker of confusion on her face. Kevin? I didn't know you were coming to my celebration. I wasn't. I had only come to withdraw my final emotional investment. The last traces of care for people who had never truly seen me. Congratulations on the promotion. I said, sincerity in my tone. Margaret's achievements had never been the issue. The true problem had always been our parents' inability to acknowledge both of their children. A flicker of uncertainty crossed her expression. Appreciate it. Are you heading out already? I gave a brief nod, unwilling to rely on my voice any further. Let them provide explanations. Let them face the aftermath of their own choices. The journey home felt surreal, like drifting through a haze. Tears welled up, but they weren't from sorrow, they were from relief. The weight I had carried for years, constantly striving to obtain a love that should have been unconditional, had finally been lifted. Mia was at Stacy's house. My former mother-in-law had sent over pictures. Her covered in baking flour, pure joy reflected in her eyes, happiness in every frame, love real and unfiltered. Family isn't about duty. It's not about shared blood. It's about the ones who stay, the ones who make you feel accepted exactly as you are. 3 months slipped by, no phone calls, no manipulative messages, absolute silence. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday afternoon, my phone screen lit up with my mother's name. My finger hovered over the decline button, but curiosity won. I picked up Kevin. She addressed me in a stiff tone, each word carefully chosen. We need to talk about this situation. The situation, meaning their financial struggles without my assistance. There's nothing left to discuss. A beat of silence. Then her voice laced with resentment. Margaret refuses to help us. Says we need to learn how to handle our own expenses. The bitterness in her tone was impossible to miss. The car got taken away yesterday. The mortgage is overdue by 2 months. Not my concern. Not anymore. I'm sorry to hear that, I replied. And a small part of me truly was. The part conditioned to believe their comfort, their well-being was my responsibility. You can't just leave us like this. We're your parents. Biological connection, not emotional support. They had never fulfilled the role of parents in the ways that counted. I have to go. Mia has soccer practice. Kevin, don't I ended the call. Block the number. Across the kitchen, Mia was intently focused on her school project, a family tree. How's it going, kiddo? I asked, leaning in. At the top, she had drawn Stacy and Brian, labeled Grandma and Grandpa. Below them, Dad and Mom were written under my name and Jessica's. And at the bottom herself, no Margaret, no maternal grandparents. Carefully, I asked, is this everyone in our family? She nodded with certainty. These are the ones who love us. Simple. Profound. True. That night, after Mia had drifted to sleep, I sat on the back porch with a glass of wine. A cool breeze brushed against my skin as I contemplated inheritance, not wealth, not property. The emotional inheritance passed down through generations. The beliefs instilled in us about love, about worth, About relationships. My parents had inherited their own wounds, their own flawed idea that love was something earned, that children were indebted to their parents rather than cherished by them. But cycles don't have to repeat, patterns can be rewritten. Mia would inherit something different from me. The unshakable truth that love isn't a transaction, that family is chosen, that the most important thing is simply being there. My phone vibrated with a message from Stacy. Brian's making his famous chili this Sunday. You and Mia coming? A smile touched my lips as I typed back. Wouldn't miss it. This was my legacy now. Not guilt, not obligation, but choice, connection, love, given freely, received wholeheartedly. For the very first time in my existence, I felt truly abundant in what held real significance. Gazing back, I could now discern the pattern with absolute clarity, the relentless pursuit, the continuous struggle, the desperate longing to be acknowledged. My sense of worth had always been measured through their validation or rather the absence of it. Every milestone had been a silent plea. Notice me, care about me, acknowledge me. The walls of my childhood room had once been adorned with academic certificates, spelling bee awards, and math competition trophies, all accumulating dust while my parents enthusiastically attended Margaret's soccer matches, her dance performances, and her unremarkable school ceremonies. When I was accepted into UCLA with a full scholarship, my father had merely scowled at the letter of admission. California? That's too far away. And who is supposed to assist your mother with the household? Not Margaret. Never Margaret. She was too absorbed in being the focal point of their universe. I left anyway. I worked my way through graduate school, established a career in finance, and reached a point where I no longer needed assistance from anyone. Then I met Jessica, charismatic, confident Jessica, with her warm gaze and an uncanny ability to make me feel like the most significant person in any setting. Her family welcomed me instantly. Holiday gatherings where my thoughts mattered. Weekend cookouts where my words were heard. Her mother, Stacy, called simply to check in. Her father, Brian, showed me how to change the oil in my car. It was unfamiliar, this effortless acceptance, this sincere interest in me. When we tied the knot, my parents found reasons to complain about everything. The venue, the date, the menu. Margaret, who stood beside me as my best woman, had looked completely uninterested throughout the ceremony. My parents left early, citing Margaret's early morning appointment the following day. Jessica's parents, they remained until the very end, helped with the cleanup, and embraced me as though I had always belonged to their family. Mia's arrival should have changed everything. She was their first grandchild, but they visited once, briefly, staying less than an hour. My mother had held her awkwardly before quickly handing her back. She resembles Jessica, she had remarked, as though that somehow justified her emotional distance. Stacy and Brian, however, had been different. They brought home cooked meals, volunteered to stay overnight during those exhausting first few weeks, and held Mia for hours just so I could rest, shower, and feel human again. Then Jessica walked away. A text message. Not even the decency of a face-to-face conversation. It was Stacy who discovered me curled up on the bathroom floor sobbing. Stacy who packed an overnight bag for Mia. Stacy who took us both into her home while I attempted to process the wreckage of my marriage. My parents' response, a single phone call. My mother's tone had carried something disturbingly close to satisfaction. Women don't appreciate men who prioritize their careers, I warned you. As if my ambition had been the problem. As if I had somehow deserved to be left behind. The divorce was brutal. Jessica battled for financial assets, but had no interest in custody. She craved freedom without responsibility. Stacy and Brian were caught in the middle, torn between their love for their daughter and their disappointment in her choices. You're still family, Brian had reassured me with unwavering certainty. That doesn't change. Mia is our granddaughter. You're her father. The equation is simple. Simple for them. Incomprehensible for my own parents. Eventually, as legal expenses piled up as single fatherhood, full-time employment, and the strain of court proceedings became overwhelming, I finally turned to them. I requested assistance, just temporarily, just until things stabilized. My father reluctantly wrote a check, small, begrudging. Don't rely on this. We're not a financial institution. Yet when their own vehicle broke down the following month, they reached out immediately. Can you cover this? Just this once? Just until we're back on track? That one time became countless times. Their demands multiplied. My boundaries faded, and deep down, I clung to a foolish unspoken hope that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, they might finally care about me the way they cared about Margaret. Pathetic, transparent, desperate, but I couldn't stop. Not until the crisis. Not until she's such a burden. Not until I finally recognized the truth. It had never been love. It had always been an exchange, and my financial support had merely been purchasing their temporary attention. Never their affection. Never their genuine care. That realization fractured something deep inside me. But in that fracture, I found release. I no longer needed to prove I was deserving of love. I already possessed it. From Mia, from Stacy and Brian, From friends who genuinely cared, from colleagues who respected me, from the family I had formed rather than the one I had been born into. 1 week after leaving my parents' house, my phone rang. Margaret's name flashing across the screen. A rare occurrence. We rarely spoke. Perhaps twice a year. Our exchange is polite yet detached. "What did you say to Mom and Dad?" Her tone was sharp, defensive. "They're spiraling over money." I had responded simply, "No more financial aid, no more enabling. They have their precious favorite. She can step up now." The silence on her end had been deafening. "They think you're being cruel, that you're getting revenge for the past." But was it truly cruel to stop depleting myself for their benefit? Was it truly revenge to finally hold them accountable? For years of emotional abandonment, "I'm not punishing anyone," I had stated. "I'm simply finished pretending." Margaret had exhaled, a sound both weary and familiar. "They're never going to change, you know. They've always been like this." A rare admission between us. A shared understanding of the roles we had been assigned before we even had a choice. Her as the cherished one. Me as the neglected. "I know they won't change," I had replied, "but I have." Another pause, then, "Good for you." 2 simple words, yet perhaps the most sincere thing she had said to me in years. After we hung up, I pondered Margaret's reality. Did she feel the weight of their expectations in a different way? Did being the preferred child come with its own invisible burdens? It didn't excuse how she had contributed to my exclusion, but it gave me insight into why she had. We had both been cast in roles we never agreed to play. Now, months after severing financial ties, I was finally grasping what real freedom meant. Not just liberation from obligation, but liberation from seeking approval from people incapable of offering it. My worth had never been defined by their recognition. My value had never been tethered to their acceptance. I had always been enough. They had simply failed to see it. Mia dashed into the kitchen, yanking me from my thoughts. "Dad, Grandma Stacy says she's making spaghetti tonight. Can we go now?" Grandma Stacy. A title earned not by blood, but by love, by presence, by a million small gestures of care. "Of course, buddy. Grab your shoes." As she bolted toward the door, a deep sense of appreciation filled me for this bright, resilient child, for the family we had built from choice instead of duty, for the profound wisdom that had emerged from hardship. Sometimes, the most valuable lessons come not from what we inherit, but from what we learn through pain. The drive to break cycles, to be better, to create something new. My parents had shown me exactly what kind of father, what kind of human I refused to become. And for that, strangely, I was thankful. As I drove toward Stacy and Brian's house, with Mia eagerly chatting beside me, I felt something settle into place. The journey from yearning for approval to finding peace, from searching for validation in others to discovering it within myself had come full circle. The weight of legacy, the emotional debts, the ingrained patterns, the suffocating expectations, I had carried them for too long, but I had finally let them go. And what remained? Lighter, purer, entirely mine. Family, love, belonging, not transactions, not duties, not desperate attempts to prove I was worthy, but choices. Intentional, deliberate, grounded in the quiet certainty that at last, I was exactly where I was meant to be. 6 months later, I received a thick envelope in the mail. The return address was from my father's attorney. For a moment, I considered tossing it directly into the trash, but curiosity won out. Inside was a formal letter stating that my parents were contesting my grandmother's will. She had passed away 3 weeks earlier, a fact I hadn't known. The inheritance, a modest estate in Vermont and a sum close to $300,000, had been left entirely to me. Not Margaret. Not my parents. Me. I sat down heavily at the kitchen table, the papers spread before me. My grandmother Rose, my father's mother, had been a distant figure in my life. She visited rarely, sent birthday cards sporadically, and maintained a polite but reserved relationship with all of us. Or so I thought. The letter from her lawyer included a personal note. "Kevin, your grandmother requested I send you this letter upon her passing. She spoke of you often." The handwritten letter tucked inside made my hands tremble. "My dear Kevin, if you're reading this, I've finally escaped this mortal coil. Don't waste tears on me, I've lived a full life, albeit one with significant regrets. Chief among them is my failure to intervene in your father's treatment of you. I watched from a distance as he recreated the same patterns his father established. The golden child and the forgotten one. In his generation, your father was Margaret. His brother, your Uncle Thomas, was you. I failed Thomas. I recognized what was happening but believed it wasn't my place to interfere. Thomas eventually cut us all off, moved to Australia, and never returned. I haven't heard from my own son in over 30 years. I deserve that loss. But I've watched you struggle for acceptance, and I've watched you finally break free. Through an old college friend who lives in your city, I've kept tabs on you. I know about the hospital incident. I know about your financial sacrifices. I know about Mia. I know you've found the courage I never had. This inheritance won't make up for decades of emotional neglect, but perhaps it can provide some tangible acknowledgement. Use it as you see fit, for Mia's education, for your own dreams, for a rainy day. It comes with no obligations, no expectations. Unlike family love should be, but rarely is in our bloodline. Your father and his sister will contest this will. Let them. My attorney has ironclad documentation of my mental competence and my explicit wishes. They will not win. I hope you find healing, Kevin. Break the cycle. It sounds like you already have. With belated but sincere affection, Grandma Rose. I must have read the letter 10 times, tears blurring my vision. A knock at the door startled me, and I found Stacy standing there with a casserole dish. We made too much lasagna, she said, then paused, noticing my expression. What happened? I silently handed her the letter and watched her face change as she read. When she finished, she set it down gently. Did you know about her passing? She asked. I shook my head. They didn't even call me. Stacy's expression hardened momentarily before softening again. Well then, she said pragmatically, we should honor her properly. Does Mia know about her great-grandmother? The question caught me off guard. Through all the family drama, I had barely mentioned my grandmother to Mia. Not really, I admitted. I didn't know her well myself. Then tonight, over lasagna, we'll tell Mia stories about her great-grandmother. You'll share what you do remember, and we'll celebrate a woman who, at the end, tried to make something right. 2 days later, my phone rang, Margaret's number. I hesitated but answered. Mom and Dad are livid, she said without preamble. They're talking about suing you directly after they lose the will contest. On what grounds? I asked, genuinely curious. Emotional distress. Financial abandonment of elderly parents. I don't know, Kevin, they're desperate and angry. I laughed, the sound surprising even me. Let them try. A pause. I'm not part of their lawsuit, Margaret said quietly. I've been doing some thinking. The hesitation in her voice was so uncharacteristic that I found myself paying closer attention. Grandma Rose called me, about a month before she died, she continued. We never really talked much, but this call was different. She asked me direct questions about you, about Mia, about how Mom and Dad treated us growing up. My breath caught. What did you tell her? The truth, Margaret said simply. That they worshipped the ground I walked on and treated you like an afterthought. That I let it happen because it was easier than acknowledging it. That I've spent my entire adult life trying to be worthy of their preferential treatment, which is its own kind of prison. I sat down, unprepared for Margaret's candor. I've been seeing a therapist, she continued. Turns out being the golden child messes you up too, just differently. I never developed real confidence because I was always afraid of losing their approval. Every achievement wasn't about personal growth, it was about maintaining my position. Do you know I've hated banking for 15 years? But I couldn't disappoint Dad by changing careers. I didn't know that, I admitted. There's a lot we don't know about each other, she said softly. I'd like to change that. Not for Mom and Dad's sake, they've made their choices. But for us. For Mia. For whatever family we might still salvage from this mess. 3 weeks later, Margaret came over for dinner. She brought a photo album I'd never seen before, pictures of us as children, before the divide between us became unbridgeable. Mia was fascinated, particularly by the photos of Margaret and me building sand castles at the beach. You two look like you were friends, Mia observed, surprised. Margaret and I exchanged glances. We were, I said. Once. We could be again, Margaret added tentatively, looking at me with a question in her eyes. As the evening progressed, I watched Margaret with Mia, awkward at first, but genuinely trying. She'd brought a science kit as a gift, and the two of them spent an hour creating volcanic eruptions in the backyard while I prepared dessert. Later, after Mia had gone to bed, Margaret and I sat on the porch with glasses of wine. I quit my job today, she announced. I nearly choked on my drink. The bank? But your promotion was never what I wanted, she finished. I'm going back to school. Marine biology. It's what I wanted to study before Dad pushed me toward finance. What did they say? Her smile was grim. Mom cried. Dad raged. Then they tried to convince me you had somehow manipulated me into ruining my life to get back at them. And I told them they needed professional help, and until they got it, I was taking a step back too. She took a long drink of her wine. I'm 38, Kevin. It's time I lived for myself. The lawsuit from my parents came as Margaret predicted, and was dismissed as quickly as the challenge to the will had been. They made a desperate final attempt to reconcile, not with genuine remorse, but with financial panic setting in as their resources dwindled. We're still your parents, my mother had pleaded on the phone. Family is forever. Family is earned, I replied, and ended the call. The money from my grandmother sat mostly untouched, except for a college fund I established for Mia. The Vermont property, however, became an unexpected blessing. The following summer, Mia and I spent 2 weeks there, joined for a long weekend by Stacy and Brian. Margaret drove up for the final 3 days. One evening, sitting on the porch overlooking the gardens my grandmother had lovingly tended, Mia sleeping soundly upstairs, Margaret turned to me. "Do you think you'll ever forgive them?" she asked. I considered the question carefully. Forgiveness suggests they've acknowledged the harm and sought to make amends. They haven't. What I have found is acceptance that they will never be the parents I needed, and peace with building my life without that expectation. She nodded slowly. "I've been reading this book my therapist recommended about family systems and patterns. Did you know that emotional neglect is actually inherited? Our parents likely experienced similar dynamics in their own childhoods." Grandma Rose's letter suggested as much about Dad. "It doesn't excuse them," Margaret clarified. "But it helps me understand. The real victory isn't in punishing them, it's in ensuring these patterns end with us." I thought about Mia, about the careful attention I paid to her emotional needs, about how Stacy and Brian modeled healthy grandparenting, about how even Margaret was working to build an authentic relationship with her niece. "They already have," I said with certainty. A year later, I received a call from an unknown number. It was a hospice nurse. My father had suffered a massive stroke and wasn't expected to recover. "He's been asking for you," she said gently. The decision wasn't easy, but I went. Not out of obligation, but out of completion. Margaret met me at the hospital, her face drawn with complicated grief. "He's been in and out of consciousness," she explained as we walked toward his room. "Mom's a mess." My mother barely acknowledged me when I entered, her attention focused entirely on my father's frail form in the hospital bed. His once commanding presence had diminished, his body shrunken beneath the thin blankets. When his eyes fluttered open and fixed on me, something shifted in them, recognition, perhaps regret. He struggled to speak, the words slurred and difficult to understand. "Kevin," he managed. "Sorry." 2 syllables. Perhaps sincere, perhaps merely the recognition of his mortality. Either way, insufficient against decades of emotional abandonment. Yet strangely, I felt no anger in that moment, only a profound sadness for all that had been lost, for the father he could have been, for the relationship we never had. "I know," I said simply, and took his hand. Not in forgiveness, exactly, but in acknowledgement of our shared humanity, our imperfect journey. He died 3 days later. At the sparsely attended funeral, I stood between Margaret and Mia, with Stacy and Brian a supportive presence in the row behind us. My mother moved through the service like a ghost, already diminished without my father's dominating presence. "What happens now?" Margaret asked afterward, looking at our mother sitting alone with her small plate of untouched funeral reception food. "She makes her own choices," I replied. "Just as we've made ours." As the months passed, my mother declined both physically and mentally. Eventually, Margaret made the difficult decision to move her into an assisted living facility, using the remainder of my parents' savings. I contributed to the cost, not out of guilt or manipulation, but out of the compassion I would show any suffering human being. I visited occasionally, brief, cordial encounters. She never apologized, never acknowledged her role in our fractured family. Perhaps she couldn't. The patterns were too deeply ingrained, the self-reflection too painful. Through it all, the family I had chosen continued to flourish. Mia thrived in school, developing a passionate interest in environmental science, inspired, surprisingly, by conversations with her Aunt Margaret, who had completed her degree and now worked at an oceanographic research center. Stacy and Brian remained our emotional anchors, hosting holiday gatherings where laughter flowed easily and everyone felt valued. On Mia's 13th birthday, they presented her with a handmade quilt, each square representing a different family memory. "Look, Dad," she pointed excitedly. "There's us at Great-Grandma Rose's house. And here's when Aunt Margaret took us whale watching." Family. Chosen, earned, authentic. Late one night, I found Mia sitting at the kitchen table, working on a school assignment. "What are you writing?" I asked. "An essay about resilience," she replied. "I'm writing about our family." I peered over her shoulder at the opening paragraph. "Family isn't always who you're born to, sometimes it's who you choose, and who chooses you back. My dad taught me that love isn't something you have to earn or beg for. Real love is steady, reliable, and present. It shows up even when it's inconvenient. It sees you for who you truly are." Standing there, reading my daughter's words, I felt the final pieces click into place. The journey from yearning for approval to finding peace, from searching for validation in others to discovering it within myself, had come full circle. The inherited patterns had been identified, challenged, and finally, broken. In their place, something new had formed, a family built on choice rather than obligation, on genuine care rather than duty, on presence rather than performance. Mia looked up at me. "Is it good?" I hugged her tightly. "It's perfect," I whispered. "Just like you." And in that ordinary moment in our kitchen, surrounded by math homework and half-empty cups of hot chocolate, I knew with absolute certainty that the cycle was truly broken. The past no longer defined us. The future, bright with possibility, belonged entirely to us.